you prefer it. I'm going to talk. I'll try. February 13, 2012 meeting of the East Penn Board of School Directors will hereby come to order. Please rise and join me in saluting the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one request to address the board tonight. Ms. Jennifer Taylor of Wescosville, and she's talking about her son's experience at 7 Generations Charter School.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Taylor, and like you said, my son is a first grader at 7 Generations Charter School in Emmaus, and I have another son who will be entering the lottery for kindergarten in the fall. My son Andrew started partway through his kindergarten year after participating in the spring 2010 lottery and then participating in the waiting list process that followed. Andrew has a disability that has limited his ability to interact with his peers in a regular classroom setting, and this has affected him through his daycare years into elementary school. As a parent, this is very difficult to see. I'm happy to say that Andrew is not the same little boy that I walked up the stairs at 7 Gen just after Thanksgiving of 2010. 7 Gen has offered Andrew the school environment and network and someone with his disability needs to work through his issues at his age. Andrew still has notable challenges that we all continue to work through, but I have seen tremendous improvements through the social and emotional programs in place. The responsive classroom techniques, all-school Wednesday morning meetings, and Kelso's conflict management techniques are some of the things that have helped Andrew keep him with his peers while they all acquire the same life skills. Andrew's disability often singles him out as an outcast, but the programs that teach mutual respect and create an accepting community have eliminated that barrier in his education. One of the things that makes 7 Gen work for Andrew is interaction with kids in different grades at his school. When we are out in the community and see 7 Gen kids several years older, he has no reservations walking up and playing with them. Another thing that 7 Gen has offered is genuine interactions with just about everybody on the staff, from teachers to specialists and administrators, as well as custodians. If we're in the grocery store or on vacation, he will ask to buy something for one of his teachers or principal file. I ask him why, and the answer is simple. He says, because they taught me or because they listened to me. When we are out for a hike, Andrew often says, I bet Mr. Optaker would like that rock, or I think Miss Miller could use that fallen tree for something. Although I'm not sure why he chose to buy a can of Spam for his music teacher, Ms. Polzano. Being part of the 7 Gen community has taught Andrew to pitch in and help his school through community work days or small classroom improvement projects after school. But 7 Gen may be labeled as the environmental green charter school, but to Andrew, 7 Gen's strength is the broader environment, using nature and his community for a meaningful education. 7 Gen has put some great things in place that develop the kids in our community, and I hope that they can be shared and adapted with the other schools in the school district. I am grateful to live in East Penn and have a public alternative school be an option in our home district.
Thank you. No other requests to address the board. We will move on to approval of minutes. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? None appearing. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The minutes are approved. At this point, I think we should have the motion on the acceptance of local audit before we ask Mr. Gorman to come up. Could I have a motion, please? So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Gorman.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There's a 117-page report that you may have in front of you, and I promise you I will not go through all 117 pages, okay? However, I do want to explain to you the purpose of why you hire me. My job is to be your eyes and ears and look over what your administration has done from a financial reporting standpoint and from a compliance standpoint. They do not involve, it's not part of my scope of my audit to include the operational standpoints of the governing of the school district. My job is to give an opinion on whether your financial transactions and your financial statements are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles as established for governments. I am required to follow two sets of auditing standards in doing that. One is generally accepted auditing standards established by the Auditing Standards Board, and the other one is government auditing standards, which are established by the Government Accountability Office in Washington, D.C., commonly referred to as GAO. In addition to being your independent auditor looking at the financial transactions, I'm also required, because of GAO standards, to report to you any significant deficiencies in those controls, any material weaknesses in those controls that we have looked at or tested, and to report to you any major compliance issues associated with the school laws of Pennsylvania. Thirdly, I also have to report to you and give an opinion on whether the school district is in compliance with federal regulations as they pertain to the federal grants, and whether there are any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in controls associated with those federal programs as well. With that being said, I'm pleased to report to you that you are in complete compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. You have no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses of controls. The year before, the report from the year before, you did have two significant deficiencies. They have been corrected by your management. So there is none to report this year, thank goodness. There are no compliance issues. You're in complete compliance with all the school laws of Pennsylvania, including the municipal laws associated with school districts. And you are in complete compliance with the federal programs and have no deficiencies associated with the controls pertaining to those federal programs as well. So I commend your administration from a financial reporting standpoint, from a compliance with laws and regulations, that they are following the guidance as required under the law and in accordance with accounting principles established for governments to follow. There is one item that I wish to go over in detail with you, however, and you can turn to page 23 and you can follow me. During this year's audit, there was a change of accounting principles that affected all governments, not just school districts, but all governments. And in case any old board member or new board member is not aware of this accounting principle and how it affects you, and if you have 2009-2010's report, you may see variances in comparing that report to this report that I need to explain to you for there's no misunderstanding. The Government Accounting Standards Board, who establishes accounting principles for governments to follow, changed the categories of fund balance and also changed definitions of what is governmental funds and what types of governmental funds there are out there. In the prior year's report, you would be able to see under the special revenue column on this page, you notice there's no column called special revenue, there would be two funds that were in that column in the prior year. One was your athletic fund, which because of this change of accounting principle is now consolidated and part of the general operating fund column. And also you have a capital reserve fund, which is established through the municipal code. And that capital reserve fund is no longer classified as a special revenue fund. It's been reclassified as a capital projects fund. So what you see in the column called capital projects is comprised technically of three separate funds. And if you would flip to page 85, 86 while holding your finger on page 23, you will see those three funds listed there, and those totals are what you represent on page 23. That's the one change. So the capital reserve fund still exists, it's just not being classified under the same fund type. The athletic fund, although it exists internally because management has chosen to keep those records separately, when the audit is completed and the financial statements are put together, they are combined with the general fund operations. So they're all in part of the general fund. The 5 categories of fund balance. You have 2 restricted fund balances and 3 what's known as unrestricted fund balances, and they're listed on page 23. Non-spendable fund balance is the first restricted fund balance. It's restricted because either the money has already been spent or it can never be spent. Now, in the school district level, you don't have the latter, but you do have the possibility of paying something in advance for next year. For example, you may prepay insurance premiums for next year for personal liability and commercial liability insurance. If you would have paid that before June 30th of 2011, you would not show that as a general fund expenditure until 2011-12. It would be shown as what's known as a prepaid asset. And if you had that, that prepaid asset would be listed as non-spendable fund balance because the resources have already been used. The next and last restricted fund balance is called restricted fund balance. That's when an outside party, outside of the East Penn School District, restricts the use of resources that they provide to you for a specific purpose. I'll give you an example. There's 2 examples I'll give you. One affects the general fund, and the other one you will see if you look at the capital projects column, there is a restricted fund balance there. The first, if somebody from your community donates money to the school district for the operations of the school district, and maybe, I wish this was the case, but obviously there's a Bill Gates in the East Penn community, and they donate $1 million. And they restrict it for a specific purpose. Let's say they want you to replace all the playground equipment, or they want you to replace this football stadium, or they want to use it to make improvements on one of your buildings. Okay? Until that money is spent, it is restricted. Cannot be used for any other purpose, so it would be classified as restricted fund balance. The other type of restricted fund balance is when a higher government, let's say the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, restricts your resources for a specific purpose. The Capital Reserve Fund is a perfect example of that, because the Capital Reserve Fund has restrictions on what you can spend money on. So the resources that are put in there automatically hold that restriction. That is why the Capital Reserve Fund has in their fund balance a restricted fund balance. In addition, when you go out and float a bond issue and create a construction fund, that money that has not been spent by the end of the year is also restricted. It's restricted because of the debt covenant with the bondholders who purchase the bonds. So those are examples of restricted. Think of restricted as something from an outside source. The next category is called committed. And that is where the people sitting on the school board have the power. If you have net resources at the end of any particular year, you can commit any portion of those resources for a specific purpose if you so choose to do so. In order to be a committed fund balance, the governing body, the school board, has to approve by resolution what they want to commit for what specific purpose. The dollar amount does not have to be determined by June 30th. You have until the end of the audit, once you know what your final fund balance is, to determine the amount that you want to commit for that specific purpose. You also have to have the availability to change your mind. So to be classified as committed also means that you have the right as the governing body to change your mind in the future. Let's give you an example. we all know, unfortunately, that based on actuarial studies, the retirement rates are going through the roof in the next couple of years, unless something miraculously happens. You could, if you chose, you could restrict or commit some of your remaining resources at the end of the year for that committed purpose and set it aside as a cushion for some of those retirement rate increases in the future. That is a specific purpose. You may change your mind, and before you even spend any of that money, maybe the school board changes hands, or maybe the majority of the school board change their mind. You have the right to reverse that commitment. Until the money is spent, that commitment will stay on the books until it's either spent or until the governing body changes their mind. The assigned portion of fund balance is the amount that management chooses based upon your school board policy. Whoever is the assignor can assign part of your ending year resources for a specific purpose again, but it carries no legal weight. That assignment goes away in the coming year, and to have assignments again, you have to reappoint, if you will, or reassign. If you notice, there is an assigned amount on the general fund in page 23 of $8,813,072. What that amount represents is the amount of fund balance you use to balance your 2011-12 budget. Now, one would, and I argued this point too when I first read this standard, well, the governing body approved this budget, the legally adopted budget, so why shouldn't it be classified as committed fund balance? The reason is because you can never change your mind. You can't reverse it. Because once the budget is adopted, you can't go back and reopen the budget to take out that fund balance and balance it by some other means. You're not allowed to do that. The only time you're allowed to reopen the budget is for state revenues or federal revenues that you did not anticipate in the original budget, according to the school code. Because you cannot reverse that original decision, it's not considered a commitment, because you have to have the right to reverse it. So that's why it's under assigned. When you look at all that's left at the end of the year, and in the general fund you have an ending fund balance of $11,809,946 at June 30th of this past year, once you have eliminated the non-spendable portion, the restricted portion, what the governing body has chose to commit, and whatever assignments are there, the remaining residual amount is unassigned fund balance. I hope that brief explanation gives you better clarity of what these new categories of fund balance represent to you. It's based on a hierarchy of how constrained are those monies to be used in the future. The highest constraint is the non-spendable restricted portion, and then you're going down. Committed would be the third highest constraint. Assigned would be next to last, and then unassigned. Does anybody have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Corbin?
I'd be more than happy to answer them. Good luck.
I just got right moment.
If not, I wish you the best. You're always welcome to contact me. I work for you. I don't work for your administration, although I get along with them. Okay. They know me for years, and they know I don't trust them. I hate to be nasty, but that's how I operate. I have to, as an auditor. I have to act that way.
Ms. Dontan?
This wasn't related to the fund balance, but I had a question on the total debt service.
Yes, ma'am.
Which shows $13,947,000.
What page are you on?
On page, it's like the second part of 68.
Your total fund balance in principal is $136,990,000. The bottom part of that graph, if you will, is including interest in the future and debt and principal. Then your total debt service is $157,783,954. The top part is principal only.
Right, okay.
Okay?
Because I was comparing it to the bond refinancing that we did, and in there, the debt service was listed at $15,576,507.
Which bond issue are you looking?
Just the last one, the general obligation series 2012.
Okay,
So it
that
looks
is
like-
not, 2012 is not reported in this report because this report only goes up to June 30th of 2011. And it does cover any new issuances that have occurred, well, up to about November of 2011, but that issue that you're referring to, if it's dated 2012, it has to be for the calendar year 2012. That would not be reported in this financial statement.
Okay, so with that 15 million, a little plus, over 16 million, that would have been the debt service during the campaign and during the primary.
What are you asking, Ms. Dunn?
Well, I was just asking because I was told when I was in the campaign that the debt service was not close to $16 million. And it looks like it was according to the general obligation. So I was just trying to figure out, do we have a $1.6 million saving?
I think the explanation, the previous one was, one is the local.
Point of order, Mr. Doctor is not recognized, Madam Chair. First, we'll see if Mr. Gorman has anything to say.
First of all, I haven't even, it looked like she was holding the official statement of the bond issue. I haven't even seen it. That would come under next year's audit.
I see.
Okay, so I haven't reviewed it, but I can tell you from reviewing them in the past, including the ones that are all listed on here, that were in effect up to June 30th of 2011, that in that bond issue, towards the back, there is a schedule of all your outstanding debt at the time that statement was issued, that official statement. And that debt may not even agree with this report, because if you made any bond payments from July of 2011 up to the time that that bond issue was implemented, that would be taken into consideration on the back schedules where they show all the bonded debt that you have outstanding. But the 15 million that you say,
Right.
do you mind if I come over
No,
there?
come on over.
I can help her a little bit better by
I just wanted to verify that this was the number before, that would have been in the spring of 2011.
Well, that's a
That's,
2012.
yeah, well, what she's looking at is the total debt, principal and interest of the new issue, okay? And that $15,576,507 would be the amount of debt that would be generated and paid for in the 2011-12 year.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yes, at the time that this bond issue was being formulated, this one.
Okay,
Okay, was this a refinancing issue?
yes.
Okay, so we
And
refinanced.
that would have been the
another
number.
debt.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Bonker?
I think one of the discrepancies in the past was the total payments and the school district's responsibility. And that, I understand, was the difference between, I don't remember the specific numbers, but there was a larger number, and some of that is paid for by the state. So I think, I recall the discussion, and the explanation was, you were talking about a total bond payment, and the budget, the school district is only responsible for the school district's portion of that.
Right, but it was all the state or tax. Okay, fine.
All right. Are there any other questions for Mr. Gorman before we enter upon any discussion on the motion? Mr. Crenshaw.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Gorman for his usual very thorough job on the audit. I've always appreciated the professionalism with which he approaches the responsibility, and I'm glad that our administration has always been so cooperative with him, providing him everything he's needed for that. So, thank you, Mr.
Well,
Gorman.
thank you, Mr. Crenshaw. I've been serving East Penn for a good many years, and I'm proud of that fact. Your administration knows that they don't know what I'm doing from year to year because I change my procedures. I keep them guessing. And they also know that as much as I like them as human beings, I cannot trust what they tell me. And because of that, that's why clients never leave me, because I keep doing good quality-oriented work. For the new members on board, just so you have some relationship, audits, and everybody does audits differently. There's a lot of room in our professional standards to this. We make the determination what we test and what we don't test. Okay. The profession says that we need to perform audit procedures on about 60% of the revenues and 60% of the expenditures to be within the standards, to be within the professional standards. In the general fund, I test between 80 and 85% of all your expenditures. And in the revenue area, I test 90%. In the capital project and construction funds and the capital reserve fund, I test 100% of everything. Because of the bond money that's going out to the bond, in the bond covenant and your obligation to the bondholders, I have to sleep at night, so I feel much more comfortable that I test as much as I possibly can to ensure the bondholders are safe, the governing body is safe as well. But things change and things always surprise me from year to year. But right now, you're in good shape from a financial reporting standpoint, so I commend you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. I have a couple of things I'd just like you to perhaps illuminate for the public.
Yeah.
When you talk about a material discrepancy, you're talking about a potential defect in the process that you found, not that you found significant amounts of money being missing. Is that correct?
Well, there are, to help people who are not accountants understand this, internal controls, which is a term that's used very loosely by a lot of people. What it represents is that any entity, I don't care if we're talking about a government, a business like Air Products or General Electric, a mom and pop grocery store, I don't, call it what you want. Any entity that has financial statements and has a financial system in place has to have controls in place to ensure that fraud is prevented and to ensure that errors are prevented. Now, when we find deficiencies in those controls, those deficiencies perhaps could create fraud if they existed, not necessarily that they do. And part of my job, and any auditor's job, is to make sure that fraud did not occur that could materially misstate your financial statements. When I talk about a material weakness in controls, that means that there is a major deficiency in the control that your entity is using that could materially misstate the financial statements. Those errors could be human errors, they could be fraudulent, or they could be erroneous errors that just are mistakes. But without getting fixed, it would mean that your financial statements would be materially misstated. And because of that, that's the major deficiency dealing with controls, is what we call material weakness. Significant deficiencies is the step down from a material weakness, where it's not as paramount, it will not necessarily cause a material misstatement. However, it is important enough to bring to the attention of the governing body or to the board of directors if we were talking about a private industry client. The last level of deficiencies and controls are what's known as control deficiencies, and they do not rarely ever run into the problem of having fraud being committed or not being committed. To be more specific with you, Mr. Ballard, we did not discover any fraud of any kind. If we did, you would have been notified at the time we discovered it, not 4 months, 5 months down the line. You would have known about it immediately. We're required to do that based on professional standards. And I have done that in the past for those unfortunate entities that I have found fraud in the past, and there's been a number of them. Fortunately, the school district, with the exception of one item that I'm aware of that happened many, many moons ago, there's no fraud going on that I can detect. There's no money being taken by any administrator or clerk or anything else. This isn't to say that it's 100% clean, but when an auditor does their job correctly, their job is to detect any fraud that could materially misstate your financial statement. I take that to the nth degree. I look at student activity clubs and organizations. In fact, one of the control deficiencies in your management letter is associated with activity funds. And I spend a lot of time on these smaller funds. Other people in my profession may not spend as much time as I do, but I do that because if there's ever a place where fraudulent things can occur, it's in the smaller funds, the smaller items that are not in the control of central management. And so we take a hard look at those items as well. I hope that answers your question.
So basically, you're giving us a clean bill of health this year, and there are no hidden slush funds or anything else floating around in the budget that nobody can account for.
One of my other clients asked me if I ever could find them money to let them know, okay? If I could find you money, I would gladly let you know and let the citizens of East Penn School District know, because I know how desperate public schools need the money. No, there are no slush funds. There are no, and I have reported inconsistencies and issues in the past that have been corrected as of right now. Not dealing with slush funds necessarily, but how to properly deal with funds that you do receive. And controls for the audience sake. The best example I can give you of a control that everybody can understand from at their own respective levels is what's called segregation of duties. When you go work for a large multinational corporation, you have somebody there that opens up the mail. And then you have somebody that if any checks came in the mail, she makes a log of those checks, and then those checks are passed to a second individual. That second individual then records those checks on a deposit slip. Then there's a third individual that takes that deposit slip to the bank. Then there's a fourth individual that takes those checks and checks to the receivable balances of who owed them the money and whether they received the money properly, and records it into the computer system. After a fifth individual codes it to the proper revenue code where it belongs to. Well, when you have all those steps, those are controls in place that you don't allow any one individual to control the whole thing, because if you allow somebody to handle the check, make the deposit, reconcile the bank account, record the check in the computer system, you run the risk of fraud. You run the risk of somebody stealing that money. That's what a control means. Controls are designed to prevent that stuff from happening. Now, for all intent and purposes, East Penn School District is not even remotely close to having those problems with controls. The majority of the resources that are provided by the citizens are reported properly and correctly. The majority of expenditures that we have tested are paid out with items that are supposed to be incurred for school district use. They're not incurred for individual private use or for individual private reimbursement for personal expenses. Okay? But, I hope that clarifies to those who may be in the audience or yourselves who are concerned about that. That's the stuff we look at. I look at it, and if there is a problem, I will report it, as I have in past years.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gorman.
You're quite welcome.
Is there any discussion on the motion? None appearing. Ms. Birksall, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. Bacher.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde. Aye. Mr. Mallard.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. Now we'll have the report of the superintendent of schools, Dr. Thomas Seidenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard and Mr. Gorman. We do enjoy working with you, and we trust you.
I wish I could say it goes the other
I
way
know.
around.
I
I appreciate the thought.
we want to say that publicly.
Okay?
We trust you. That's okay. Firstly, Mr. Ballard, I'm going to ask Mr. Glancy, we have an agenda item tonight about some water heaters. I'm going to ask him to explain what that motion is all about. Mr. Glancy.
Thank you very much. I handed out some information to the board that explained that we've had some water heater failures in the last couple of weeks, and we have put in some temporary measures and have one replacement unit in that was in stock but was not really sized properly, but it was what we could get as quickly as we could get it to keep our dishwashing and other hot water needs in our kitchens ongoing. So what I have is some of the background. The expenses for proper replacement of these water heaters is $20,200, and my recommendation is that that come out of the capital reserve fund money. What I've attached to that is the capital reserve fund projection, which goes from 2009, 2010 out to 2013, 2014. And also, I've included the capital reserve fund history sheet. So we've updated the history sheet so that everyone has that available to look at, and you'll notice that those dollars tie to the projected sheet. Now, the projected sheet goes out past 2011, 2012. The history only goes to 2011, 2012. If the board would notice, the amount in the capital reserve fund is staying pretty level, which is how we're trying to manage the fund, not spend it down to nothing. We do have some income coming in each year for the next couple of years. And so I'm showing that the water heater replacement is coming out of that. I'm also showing the projected amount for continuing our paving replacement project, which we did last summer. We did the paving replacement out of the capital reserve. So that was paid for the projects we did last summer for the new sidewalks that were done around the high school, the new sidewalks that were done around other schools, repaving play areas and walkways. So what I'm encouraging the board to do is support the resolution, which is 8-4, which gives us the ability to be able to spend $20,200 from the capital reserve fund. And I would like to inform the board that my plan is to give you a total update in 2 weeks at our next meeting for the capital reserve plan and the capital plan for this summer's projects. So this is the first step because we really need to get these heaters replaced as quickly as possible for the rest of the school year to make sure that we have hot water to clean our dishes and everything else that we need to wash in these 2 schools. I'd be happy to answer any other questions the board might have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Fancy, Mr. Earnshaw?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I noticed on the projected sheet, the projection sheet, we've got the water heater replacement for 2012-13. Are we going to wait till after July 1st?
We were going to try to do that as quickly as possible, so I could certainly move that to the year before, current year.
Yeah, well, if we're planning to do it before June 30th, then it really should be in the...
I can certainly make that adjustment and bring that back to you next week.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Fancy, Ms. Dodges?
Is this the kind of thing that needs to go out to bid?
What we're doing is buying material only. We're supplying the labor, and because we're able to get these now in state contract, we're not going to have to be able to go out for bid on the materials.
I think. How old were the ones at Iron?
I would be guessing, but I think they were 12 years old, 13 years old.
That's difficult.
Normally the last 20 years. Since these are commercial grade, they're not like we have in our houses. These are commercial grade heaters. But unfortunately, the insides of the one came apart, and it said in the letter to replace it or repair it would have been much more than what we're trying to do with these high efficiency gas heaters.
When you say high efficiency, like what is that, 80-90%?
Well, I think these are 95 plus. I can certainly get that information for you. But it's more efficient than the current ones in place. If those were high efficiency for 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Thank you.
Mr. Clancy, you mentioned that it was through a state process. Maybe you'd like to just describe briefly the CoStar's process and how the state does the vetting of vendors.
Normally, if we need to go out for bid for a project more than $10,000, we need to advertise it, we need to have specifications and drawings available. We have to advertise it in the newspaper, collect the bids, have a public bid opening, bring it to the board, and have the bids approved by the board. If we can go through the state process, which is co-stars or just a state contract, the state has already gone through all of the steps for us. So they've already created the specifications, they've already put it out for bid, and the vendors that want to participate have already taken part in that, and those bids are on record. So the process is still being done, but it's been done for us by the state.
Any other questions? Continue on, Dr. Seibert.
Thank you very much. And one of the things I think Mr. Valenci wants to do, Mr. Donchis and the rest of the board members, is come back and tell you exactly what projects we'll have to go out to bid going forth next year. And that's one of the reasons we want to have that discussion with you. So at some point, we'll ask you to take action because we do want to move on those projects during the summer. So we want to let you know so there's no surprise when we come to the budget presentation late in March or in April. Okay? Okay, just lengthy report tonight, so please bear with me. We're going to talk a lot about some good news, and I think we'll start with, just want to remind the board that our students are out and about in the community. We're going to talk about what they specifically do a little bit later on, but the Elementary Chamber Orchestra, they were out and played at recent event, Snow Blast for the borough, and we're very happy that our kids are out and about. Been that kind of nice work. Also, if you read the morning call last week, you see that a former Emmaus student, my understanding is did not graduate from Emmaus High School, but was here for just about every year, but his last year, Dane DeHaan, rising film star, the next Leonardo DiCaprio, film star and rising film star. He's appearing now in Chronicle. He signed up for 3 more movies, and we wish him all the best, and it's nice to have one of our students. We'll claim him as our own. You know, he moved to North Carolina. Mr. Policano and I had a discussion earlier or last week about foundations, and I haven't really reported back to the board in a while, but I just want to let you know that I think in December I had an opportunity to meet with Dr. Wright and Mrs. Holman, her assistant superintendent. They both represent Northwestern Lehigh District. I was very interested in what they're doing with their foundation. Mrs. Bloys, now she's back, has been in contact with Parkland, Nazareth. We have other contacts at Wilson, West Lawn, and certainly if the board wants me to pursue and do a presentation at some point on what we're finding out about foundations, I would be most happy to do that. As you know, these are 501c organizations. The board would have to direct the administration, give me basically direction to go ahead and form them. Basically, the Board of Education has no role. They are independent of the school district. At most, I may serve as an ex officio and perhaps one other board member. We would not have voting rights. We would need strictly volunteers to set up that foundation. Announce that we probably need an attorney to draft the articles of incorporation, so to speak, and then move on with finding the right kind of people to serve as a board. So we have looked into that, and again, you can work with Mr. Ballard if you want us to do a PowerPoint presentation. We certainly can do that. My own opinion is I think it's a lot of work, but I think it's something that we may want to seriously look at coming up. It would provide alternative funds for some of the things we do. It's certainly, from what I understand, and believe me, it's been 5 years now, but my last position, Brick, we looked at foundations for over a year and a half, and we found striking similarities and striking differences, and basically it's the purpose of why these things are constructed, and most foundations will tell you what you have as your goals really makes the difference. And like in Montgomery, New Jersey, they built a $10 million football stadium. Good for them. That was what needed to be done in that district. They found like 15 people who were well-heeled. They went and they actually got a $10 million line of credit, and they paid it back in 10 years. but you're talking about high-level executives from Merrill Lynch and Pearson, things like that. We saw some other districts that do support technology. Northwestern Lehigh, their main goal is to support technology. But certainly, foundations generally work with the school administration identifying goals. So we will be happy to explore that. Just give us the go-ahead and we can talk about that. I have met several times with Bob New, who's the executive director of the Mid-Atlantic Foundation Groups. I think years ago, Mrs. Fuller, you met with, and Mr. Coates was there when we were looking at trying to find creative ways to build the all-weather track in a road Dale's built up. So it's something I think we ought to take a look at. So, some good news last week. Mays High School had a scholarship signing for those athletes who are moving on to Division I and Division II. Pleased to tell you that 16 students signed scholarships, and those scholarships represent $1.2 million. And some of the institutions that our athletes will be attending, again, are very impressive. Northwestern, Duke, University of Richmond, and we're very pleased with the level of academic prowess these student athletes bring to the table. 3 of those students were academic All-Americans, and 4 are members of the National Honor Society. So we are so proud of these students because they are students before they are athletes. Also, I am delighted to tell you, last October we honored 11 National Merit semifinalists. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to tell you all 11 are now National Merit finalists, and I think that's an incredible tribute to those 11 outstanding young people. Recently, our 2 middle schools had an opportunity to participate in the math competition. 30 middle schools participate in a project called Math Counts. I'm happy to tell you that our middle school finished 2nd. Their teacher advisor is Julie Hummel, and we had 2 students, Katie Zhu, who finished 3rd overall in the student section, and Samir Lay, who finished 8th overall. Also, I'm pleased to report to you that Lower Macungie Middle School finished 7th, which is their best showing ever, under the guidance of Michael Duarte and Jacob Gilbert from Lower Macungie Middle School finished 11th overall. So I'm very excited about what our students have done in local math competitions. Reading the paper, we've put out a request for parent community volunteers to serve on an advisory board. We are creating a STEM advisory board. We've had great success the last 2 years, but we thought what we'd like to do is reach out to local scientists, and we have a lot of parents. We have 16 individuals already who expressed interest, and our goal is very simple, to communicate with people who deal with science, technology, engineering, and math on a daily basis. We want to hear from them about helping us to develop what would be appropriate problem-solving activities for our students at all grade levels moving forward. We want to find out what's timely, what's meaningful, and how we can maximize best the talents of our teachers and our students. So we're very excited about that. And we have another week or 2, and then we'll ask those people to come to sort of a coordinating meeting, and we're delighted that we have 16 community members already who are expressing an interest in joining. Along with that, we are well on our way to completing the Green Ribbon School application, and we want to thank Kevin Campbell of Barry Isaac for his help. Mr. Glancy and his staff have put together the application. Mr. Campbell is reviewing it and offering us suggestions, and we're going to go ahead and see if we can bring home the bacon, so to speak, in Pennsylvania's first round of Green Ribbon schools. On the district calendar, I want to note there is one small adjustment. That's November 6th. We are joining with all the other districts in Lehigh County. That will be offered as an Act 80 day, and then we can claim a day for LCTI. And so I'm happy that we can accommodate all of our fellow superintendents and everybody in the district. Everybody in the county is going to go ahead with November 6th as an Act 80 day. Continuing along with good news, December, our Future Business Leaders of America group, under the guidance of Alexis Schultz and Kelly Bauer at the high school, they competed regionally. We had 11 students move on to state competition, and a total of 14 students who scored at least in the top 3 in their individual categories. So we want to congratulate Mrs. Schultz and Ms. Bauer for the hard work they do. In fact, I think there's an agenda item tonight seeking their permission to go to the state competition. So we certainly want to wish them and their students well. Last week, as you know, February 1st, we had the annual Skills USA event. Students from LCTI were in competition with other vocational technical schools in the region. And I'm pleased to tell you that at least 4 event students placed. Quanisha Grant finished first in commercial baking. Benjamin Bull finished 3rd in electronics. Caitlin Benikoff finished first in culinary arts, and Brandy O'Brien finished 3rd in health occupations. So we congratulate those students, and they'll be moving on to further competition. And also some really neat staff recognitions coming down the pipe. Again, if you look at your agenda items tonight, there are 2 people that were asking your permission that they be given the opportunity to grade AP examinations. That's nationwide testing. So Steve Kutz will be going, I think we already approved him. He's invitation for Spanish. Todd Burkhart will be in math, and then Beth Stout has been asked to serve as an evaluator for AP calculus. And again, I think that's outstanding that Dearborn High School staff members have been asked to serve in such a prestigious adventure. Sorry we didn't have these for your packets tonight, but I'm going to ask you to add them to your packets of information tonight. One of the things, maybe you can use this as sort of a budget primer, looking at another dimension. Does that have to go around? Just left. Okay. Need another one? This list is comprehensive, and I'm not going to go through every one on the list, but a lot of times people in the community want to know what's the value added of our students. Well, what we try to do is prepare a list for you. And what I'm happy to tell you is that each elementary school, each of the middle schools and the high school, our kids are deeply engaged in doing wonderful projects and doing wonderful things for our community. And if you look at the pages and go through them, I think you'll be very impressed with what our kids are giving back, how they're active, and how our teachers are working closely with a variety of elements throughout the community. And I certainly don't want to highlight one of these activities at the expense, but when people say, why are we investing in our kids? And I think what I want you to understand is our kids are investing back in their community. And I'm so proud of our staff members and our students who are doing so much and making it known to the population that we do give back. We just don't take tax dollars, our kids give back. So take a look at that list. It's kind of comprehensive. We're really proud of it. We're going to post this on our website, and we're very proud of what our kids do in the community. Okay, now, that's sort of a warm-up to the governor's budget. And I know Mr. Ballard will have comments later on, so I'm only going to make comments to what I know about the budget. The total that we're getting, supposedly in state aid, is now called Student Achievement Education Block Grant. The total was $14,423,807. I can tell you that in addition to that, special education funding is level, no increases. There is no ABG grant, and there is no charter school reimbursement. Now, if I told you that Mr. Glancy, Mr. Frank, and Mrs. Sertival have spent countless hours trying to figure out what it is we're getting and how do we compare it from last year, I will tell you that we have failed. So rather than get into the specifics, in your packets, and again, trying to split this right down the middle, there are two spreadsheets for you. One represents a spreadsheet from the Republican Party, and one represents a spreadsheet from the Democratic Party. And I am not going to pick a winner tonight. What I will tell you is that every professional association in the state, PASA, which I belong to, PASBA, which Mrs. Sertable belongs to, Pennsylvania School Boards Association, all those groups will be conducting webinars and training sessions in the next several weeks. And we're trying to find a methodology that's easy for us to compare what we have in state aid this year as to what we're getting next year. And rather than say something that would be foolish on my part and something I don't want to stand by, they're the two figures. So if you like the Republican numbers, go ahead and use them. If you like the Democratic numbers, use those. Your choice. All I can tell you is Debbie Sertable and I agree maybe it's not as bad as we thought it would be. And I think maybe we can be quoted on that. However, there are some nuances that we just haven't figured out yet. And again, I'm reluctant to say, to give you a dollar figure on how we did. So, you want to add anything? That's pretty fair. So, it's $14,423,807, and at some point we'll, as soon as we learn a fair way of giving you the numbers, an accepted way of giving you numbers, then we will. I certainly don't want to get caught up in the political comments going on statewide. I choose to withdraw from that discussion at this point. Now, I think last board meeting, just dovetail a little bit what Mrs. Donchis was talking about, and I'll maybe again talk about this in terms of a budget pre-primer. As I mentioned, one of the things, at least in the budget presented by the governor, is level special education funding. So we presented, Mrs. Picaric and her staff will kind of put together for you a little report on special ed, and 3 sheets looking at special education enrollment totals, special education mid-year, where we are right now on totals, and then looking at autism. And I'm not going to go over each one of these numbers. You can see the charts. They speak for themselves. You can see as superintendents, as board members, as community members, we're very concerned when special education is level funded. And I think this is the 4th year in a row, or 5th year in a row? 5th year in a row it's level funding. When you have more students to serve and you have level funding, somebody's making up the difference. And I think that's a fair statement. So, at some point, as we meet with our legislators, as community groups get activated throughout the state, one of the things we're certainly going to push the legislature is to take a long, hard look at how special education is funded in this state. And in our humble opinion, although we're happy that it's level funded, it certainly is not meeting the, as opposed to being cut. It's not nearly enough. Now, we also were asked last week about some mandates, and I thought it would be just a simple exercise to look at some, oh, by the way, going back to foundations, I did receive a letter from an alumnus of MAS High School, Jay Ianniti, who's from Newbury Park, I think it's in Massachusetts. He's chairperson of their foundation. He'd be most welcome, most happy to help us develop our foundation. Sorry. One of the things that was asked of us, what are some large outstanding mandates? But let me give you some of the small ones. And we haven't quite figured out how to pull these up, but here's some regulations that we're all dealing with. Right to know law. It's great for the public. There's a cost. And if I would total the hours of copying and the total hours that SEAL has to deal with this, we almost could use a full-time position for that. Here's the little one, but we haven't figured out the cost. School bus idling notice. School bus idling. Keystone exams. Tax study commissions. Act 32. We do have a cost for that. Required standard budget forms. Transportation for private charter school students within 10 miles of district boundaries. These are mandates and regulations we have to do. Body mass index recording of all students. That's something that our nurses haven't had to do, they do now. Wellness policies, green construction certifications, physical exams for homeschool students involved in extracurricular activities. We don't pay for those kids, but they do participate. Sports teams, we have to pay for their medical exams. Certified workplace safety committees, a lot of time spent on that. Accountability block grants, grant funds required only to fund all-day kindergarten. Required notifications to residents of certain things like homestead exemptions. These all add up. They're not big deals, but they do add up. Required written policies for students with asthma inhalers. And required CPR training for staff members as well as general public. Special education services for cyber charter school kids. And so those are things that we deal with. And I really don't know if we can ever get a firm cost of these things, but they all add up to change and change. Now, the last thing I put in your packets is sort of a mini spreadsheet. And I'm only going to talk about a couple things. Just let me go through them. It's this chart here. This one. Let's look and say, if state and federal government would do what they've legislated, it would make a difference in this budget. In fact, in lots of budgets, but this one specifically. I'm not talking, this is not a pro statement, it's not an anti statement, it is what it is. Charter school law specifically states that local districts will get a 30% reimbursement on your actual cost a year later. If that would happen based on this year's expenditures, this community would receive $915,258 in reimbursements. We're not getting that. We did it last year. We're not getting it this year. I want to remind you again, a mill's about 1.6 million. Here's what concerns us about special ed. Special ed funding, as we said, has been level for the last 5 years. Let's just look at the last 3 years. Inflation's been running around just about 3%. Look today, we could be off. I think it's about 2.8%. It could be off a couple decimals. But let's just say, for sake of argument, if we got an inflationary rate every year, that would certainly help our coffers by $275,000. Here's one that always is of concern to us. When the state got involved, and there are certain youngsters in our community that really need some high-level specialized services. Their expenses are well over $40,000. We're eligible for about $958,000, dollar for dollar, reimbursement for serving those children. We've been told the max we'll get is $150,000. The state simply is not reimbursing us their differential. That is a considerable amount of money that we should be getting reimbursed for, and we're not. And let's look at the feds. When they originally passed IDA in 1972, I do believe, it was supposed to be a 40% reimbursement for actual special ed costs. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, we got $1,089,000 this year. If we looked at what would 40% be, that would mean we would get an additional $1.5 million from federal sources. Those who want to know about other programs that we are obligated to run and we don't get a whole lot in state reimbursements, ELL, that's English Limited Language Learners, we're obligated to do that. We do get some Title III revenues from the feds. Our total expenses, that would be teacher salaries and materials, $577,116. We subtract what we get from the federal government, and taxpayers in this district are paying $545,434 for that mandate. Gifted. And I'm not arguing, these are outstanding programs, but they are mandates. We get Zippo from the state for gifted, and our net costs are $513,804. And then here's my newest one, which has, I think, tangible outlay. That's the Act 32, Earned Income Tax Commission. We've looked at our cost over the last two years. We're out $25,297,000 and no reimbursement for that. So, if the state would pay its bills and the federal government would give us what they said they were going to give us, that would mean at a minimum another $4.7 million of revenue for this district. Now compare that to what we could raise the tax rate by in terms of the index, and if we got and used all the exceptions, that would add up to about $2.4 million. So do the math, folks. I would love to tell you, if we got that money from the state and federal government, we won't have a tax increase either. Boy, I feel good, just like the governor. But that's, I think, moving forward. And if we're ever going to have a platform with the legislatures, and I know that there's going to be some community activism coming up in the near future, these are the kind of numbers that we have to talk to our elected officials about. It's one thing to mandate, and it's another to pay in that bill. And so you asked the question, and I think we're going to take some time to show you what some of those costs are. And Mrs. Sertival will do a much more defined cost on mandates and non-mandates. But that's a little starter for you. Okay? So we got some reimbursements about $4.7 million, and that would be really nice to have 2.3 million more. And I certainly think we could balance the budget with that and have a no tax increase. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Dr. Seidenberg on his presentation? Seeing none, we will go on to a motion on item 5.2. I have a motion, please. Second. Is there any discussion on 5.2 personnel? None appearing. Ms. Burke, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Hyde. Aye. Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Mrs. Doncheck.
Aye.
Mrs. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. Bacher.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye. The next item on the agenda is 5.3, the 2012-2013 school calendar. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Seidberger, would you like to make any comments on this?
No, Mr. Ballard, as I said before, I reported last board meeting. I'm convinced that our colleagues in some other districts, once they get their contracts resolved, will be moving towards this pre-Labor Day calendar as well. We made one minor adjustment, which I mentioned, and since it's been out there 2 weeks, we talked about last time, we have not received any comments from the public at all, anything remotely negative in hearing from the public or staff for that matter.
Okay. Any comments? Mr. Stoltz.
Well, I do believe you, Dr. Steinberger. Unlike our auditor, I trust you.
Okay, thank you.
This is the curious time of year when those strange little creatures called politicians come out of hiding and show up at your door with clipboards that look like this. And I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of parents. I did not once bring this up. I had several parents bring this up and say, well, we don't really mind it, but we would prefer if you started doing this next year instead of this year, because we had planned vacations or whatever. And my neighbor grabbed me about this as well. So I don't have any personal strong feelings on this, but just because I've talked to enough parents that I feel that I need to represent them, I'm going to vote no on this. That's my only reason. Again, I have no strong feelings about this at all, but I'm representing the people I talk to. So.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Thanks, Mr. Ballard. This is a challenging issue, right? So it changes long-standing practice in the district, and at the same time, I know what it's been like in mid-June with the students. They check out. They're not focused at all. So ending a little earlier in the year, I think, is a good thing for making the time more productive instead of just the glorified child care service for the students in this district, which sometimes the last few days of school turn into. We also have the issue with the seniors graduating. This will move the end of school closer to their graduation date, which I think is great. It will give us more time to prepare students for the mandated testing. We've had plenty of discussions here about the merits or demerits of such things, but they're fixed on the calendar. Having an extra week of solid instruction, I think, is a good thing. So these are all things that vote in favor of it. On the negative side, many families do like to take vacations at that time of year. Some feel it's too early to start back. I think all in all, the positives outweigh the negatives. I think the challenge we really have is this antiquated system that was based on an agrarian economy that really doesn't exist in much of this country anymore. It used to be that the students needed to be out of school so they could help work on the crops and bring the crops in at harvest time. I don't see a lot of youth out there operating the big tractors and the harvesters and the other farm equipment. I think there are some cases where the students do participate in a family farm, but it's a very limited number of our students. I personally would like to see us move to a more year-round schedule. Maybe we have the same number of instructional days, but instead of having 2.5 months off in the summer, we've got 2 or 3 weeks in the fall and 2 or 3 weeks in the winter and 2 or 3 weeks in the spring. You know, the advantage to that is you wouldn't have as much of the education kind of evaporating over the summer as so often happens with the students. The other advantage, of course, is that it would give parents a lot more flexibility in scheduling vacations for off-peak times. I know I'd love to take my kids to maybe North Carolina in the middle of winter, or maybe to visit family out in different parts of the country when the weather is a little nastier here and a little nicer where relatives live. But instead, we're confined to the same summer time that everybody else goes. We pay higher rates for airfare. We have if we stay in a hotel, we pay higher rates on the hotel. We're competing with the crowd who want to take a vacation to a destination spot. These are all things that would be avoided by year-round schooling. Now, of course, the negative is students who count on the summertime to earn money for college or other priorities that they have. They wouldn't have that. But I think this country is long overdue for a discussion of doing away with this antiquated schedule and bringing our more into line with what is typically done in other parts of the industrialized world. That's not a discussion we can have on our own, but certainly something that needs to be raised at least the state level and probably the federal level as well. I don't know that we'll see that change in my lifetime or even in my grandchildren's lifetimes, but certainly it's something that I think needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw. Other comments? Ms. Sanchez?
I will concur with Mr. Earnshaw on the year-round. I also would like a conversation about that. I was just wondering, is there something like the third day of school number is there anything about the schedule that would affect it if a whole bunch of people were on vacation. They didn't show up.
No. Excuse me. Just got all of a sudden the last 2 minutes. No, that's a count of students who are on our rolls. Excuse me. We make adjustments every month, but a third day enrollment's kind of perfunctory. Just get a snapshot of who's on the rolls now. We make adjustments probably a week, 2 weeks, 10 days if the kid doesn't appear. So I don't think that would have any bearing on our third day numbers at all. And if you look at historically, we're always going to have less high school students than when we thought we did, and possibly less middle school kids than we thought we did. But I don't see where this is going to change. Now, in response, if you don't mind, Mr. Bauer, certainly for those parents who have plans, we're always sensitive, and there are procedures and policies in place that parents can contact the school. We make accommodations. No one will lose their schoolwork, but they need to let us know. Probably sometime this spring, if that's the case, and then we have lots of families that go on certain activities, and we provide them with an opportunity to catch up for work.
Okay, I will note that again, as Dr. Seifert said, there are district policies for handling this. Parents can apply for educational vacations even during the middle of the school year. So this is something that can be handled, and I'd also note that we're giving at least 6 months notice. And unfortunately, no matter how much notice you give, it is never going to be enough for a certain fraction of public. I'm sorry we can't help that, but in my estimation, 6 months is a reasonable amount of notice for this kind of thing, and so I will be supporting it. Are there any other comments? None appearing. Ms. Birdsall, will you call a roll, please?
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Mrs. Donchess.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. Bacher.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Nay.
Ms. Hyde. Aye. Mr. Bauer.
Aye.
7 ayes, 1 nay.
All right, we have reports for other educational entities. Ms. Fuller for Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit.
Thank you. We last met on the 16th of January, which happened to be Martin Luther King Day, and there was a spirited discussion about meeting on Martin Luther King Day. And the consensus finally arrived that Martin Luther King Day is all about community service, and there is no greater community service than working on behalf of our students. So that put that concern to rest. Matters that were discussed was that CLIU is working with the Capital IU to assist school districts who may not have had the foresight and the resources we have at East Penn to prepare a e-learning 21, which is a virtual learning network, so that smaller school districts within the Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit can indeed implement their own cyber charter schools and afford their students the option and also benefit from the cost savings, as we have learned that to implement our own cyber charter school costs us in the realm of about $4,000 versus sending all of the average daily membership money on. Also, the CLIU is becoming very instrumental in helping to develop teacher evaluation tools that are being required by the state. And this is a role that is falling to intermediate units. We received information about student counts being served. And in East Penn, 315 of our students are receiving support from CLIU. 64 of them are considered major assignments, which would be defined as deaf or hearing impaired, emotional support, enhanced autism, learning support, life skills, and multiple disabilities. About 239 are receiving an array of related services that can include physical therapy and occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, and work-based learning. And our next meeting will be the third Monday of the month.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Ms. Fuller, Mr. Earnshaw?
Just to clarify, that's a cyber learning option rather than a cyber charter school.
That is correct.
Districts aren't allowed to create charter schools.
That is correct. forgive me for speaking.
Dr. Seidenberg?
Yes, thank you for bringing it up, Mrs. Fuller. We're very pleased with what Dr. Ivan and Mr. Culp are doing in that regard, and we're certainly going to take a long, hard look at that option. I'm one of the components of that program we're intrigued with is the teacher training. As you know, our goal is at some point to shift away from VLN and to create our own. And so one of the things that Parkland, Whitehall, and Southern Lehigh will be doing is working with the IU to see at some point if we can merge these programs, because we see the tremendous upside for offering a countywide program, much like is going. In fact, I think if we had our druthers, we had more time, perhaps this time next year, we may come back with a report that would be much more favorable us moving in that direction. If we're going to make that move, we certainly would want to work with our parents of our own. We have about 30 parents now enrolled in our own cyber high school. We certainly would want to let them know that there's going to be no change in the rigor and the course selection. But again, I for one, am really excited about the teacher training component that would allow some of our own staff members to become adept enough at offering a full online course.
Any other questions? For Lehigh Career and Technical Institute, Ms. Hyde?
Okay, everyone got this correct? So most of the information I'm going to be telling everybody is in this. Just like I said before, we're staying within the 1.7% index. The one thing that we did discuss, that enrollment has decreased slightly with LCTI, and it's been kind of across the board, not just with East Penn. I think one maybe increased, Northern
Allentown.
Allentown. All right. So that gives us, as a 5-year average, about 255 students that we're sending there. And that puts East Penn's responsibility of about 9.38% of the total budget. And once again, you can see in here the comparisons with everybody else. Like Allentown has 43.82%, and Parkland is 13.96% of the budget. There's 3 major factors, and I find this the most interesting aspect, that goes into our capital budget, and that's the 5-year rolling average, the cost per pupil, and the percent share of the capital debt service. And one thing we have to keep in mind, when enrollment goes down, the cost per pupil goes up, right? And you can see that the cost has gone up. It's about $5,284 at this point. And in 2008-2009, it was $4,652 to send a pupil to LCTI. So that means that our total general fund budget for our member district is $2,137,708. And that's with the overall budget of being $23,097,730. We also have the academic unit, which has been done fantastic. It's actually increased with our student growth of 50% in a 5-year period. And our member district calculations for East Penn is $9,961, with our overall budget there of $374,290. Sure, everyone's going to have something to add, because I feel like I'm not filling Ms. Fuller's shoes properly, because she's a pro at this. And just to let everyone know, we are meeting again February 22nd. Which I think is Ash Wednesday. So, and as we heard from Dr. Steinberger, our students always do well in the competitions, so this is a fantastic education that they're receiving, and I hope that the other members really recognize that and vote for this budget when it comes around. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Anyone else? None appearing. Thank you, Ms. Hyde. I'll get on to legislative, I guess. First of all, I want to report that I attended the NSBA Federal Relations Network in Washington, D.C. As you recall, 2 years ago, I asked the board to support me for that. It was granted, and the NSBA holds this event every year in February to go to Congress and lobby for education on various issues. And we spend a day and a half in meetings getting information about what's happening with the federal budget, what's happening with federal direction on legislation. And this year the focus is on reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESEA, otherwise known as No Child Left Behind, NCLB. And the fact that that's somewhat stalled in Congress, people are trying various ploys. People are proposing stopgap bills to take care of certain things that everybody agrees are broken. Other people are pushing for a complete rewrite of the law to make sure that everything is taken care of at once. There was supposed to be this week a new draft bill out from the Education Committee in the House, and we'll have to see what that looks like. A lot of states are applying for waivers, most of which around meeting the impossible goal of 100% proficiency by 2014. Many of us have been pushing for years to get the NCLB reconciled with IDEA, the special education law, so that if you're meeting the student's IEP under IDEA, that is to be considered adequate yearly progress for that student. We're hoping to get some movement in that area too, because it's ridiculous to ask many of these special education students to take an exam that's geared for regular education students and ask them to pass that kind of exam. So 3 of us, 2 representatives from Parkland and 1 from East Penn, namely me, went into our congressman's office, and we spent about an hour and a half with one of his staff members. This was Charlie Dent's office. He had a meeting of the ethics committee, which was called suddenly. So we were not able to meet with Charlie personally, but oftentimes meeting with the staff, we formulated his policy positions for him and help him understand the issues is just as important as speaking with the member. We'll try to corner him in the district when he gets here, as he does frequently, and talk to him about these issues. And other members of the state delegation had a meeting with some of Senator Toomey's staff. I am not able to report that there was much movement there. Senator Toomey is a staunch supporter of vouchers and was not interested in many of the issues that the state delegation wished to bring to his office, so meeting with staff was kind of perfunctory. But at least we showed our presence there and said that we're not going away. While we were in Washington, of course, Governor Corbett came out with his budget announcement. And Dr. Seidenberger was trying to be apolitical. I'm going to be political. We have a situation here that people don't realize in some measure what's really happening here, and it's another sucker punch to the voters and to education that's happening here. In previous years, the state made payments to the school district under various accounts, one of which was the largest one, which is the basic education subsidy. And that was a number that was, for East Penn, always a strange number, because being a wealthy district, we never got what you would really expect as an increase in our basic education subsidy to match inflation. We would get some hold harmless number, usually around 2% at maximum in the basic education subsidy. And we could sort of count on that in other years besides last year, that the basic education subsidy would only be growing at 2% no matter what our population was doing. So in a year when Lower Macungie Township added 440 students to our population, we got the 2%. Didn't matter. That was all we got. And also along with that were certain other payments that went in separate accounts. The basic education subsidy, that was Social Security payments, where the state pays half of the Social Security payments for all of our employees. And another one was the pupil transportation subsidy, which was based on the number of students that we transported in the previous year. And so if you had increasing numbers of students, that number would also go up. And then there was the non-public and charter school pupil transportation subsidy, which is also not a full payment of the amount of transportation costs, but it's some number that was based on the number of students you transported. And so if your number of students transported to non-public and charter schools went up, that number would go up also automatically because it was based on a formula for how many students you transported. Well, now comes the proposal for 2012-2013. And what do we have? The basic education subsidy is no longer being talked about. We are getting a block grant. And this block grant now is to supposedly include, besides the basic education subsidy, the Social Security payments, the pupil transportation costs, and the non-public transportation costs. But wait, we have no way of knowing if those numbers now have actually gone in accordance with the number of students that you had, because it's all part of this block grant that is now going to be, quote, more efficient for the school districts to administer. So it's going to be possible in future years for the budget to say, yes, we increased the block grant, but they're not going to tell you whether or not you got additional money for transportation and Social Security payments and basic education subsidy. It's just going to be that the block grant went up. So if the block grant doesn't go up as much as it would have under the old system where you've got a percentage on your basic education subsidy and you got reimbursed for what you actually spent on Social Security and pupil transportation, guess who gets to eat those numbers that don't go away? Again, the local taxpayers. Because the block grant will hide all of that. Oh, the block grant went up, but you know, you've got to sit there and run through all these calculations trying to figure out whether the block grant went up enough. And I'm going to guarantee you that it won't. Because the object of this whole charade with the block grant is to hide the fact that they're cutting back educational expenses and to give them cover. Because if you look at those two figures that Dr. Seidenberger handed out, the Republican figure and the Democratic figure, you'll find out that they're talking about things in entirely different ways. The Republican figure talks about the block grant with the Social Security and pupil transportation costs in it. It fails to mention that there's another block grant that was canceled for $95 million across the state. And we had a substantial amount of money coming in from that block grant also. So we lost that money out of our total amount that the state would be giving us. So that's what, you take a look at the Democratic figures, they mention the block grants, and on the Republican figures, they mention the other subsidies. So what you find is that it's a shell game to hide where the money is going, make it more difficult to understand whether or not your local school district is being reimbursed in total for all of these other expenses, and saying, oh, you have flexibility. Yeah, now you'll have flexibility to reassign your basic education subsidy to transportation when they don't supply enough transportation money. That's the flexibility they're giving you. This is not an exercise being done for our flexibility, let me tell you. That's the excuse. It's not there. There are no payments for charter schools again, so we're still down that amount. As our charter school expenses increase, we're down further. Local taxpayers are picking up the expense for those charter schools. So once again, this particular thing, it still has to go through the legislature. We don't know what the arguments are going to be, but you have to talk to your legislator and say, this is baloney, okay? You're trying to hide the funds so you can cut them. We know that, we're going to let the public know that, and let them know that this is another smoke and mirrors game. Not as bad this year, but next year, I can guarantee you it's going to be worse. This block grant idea is nothing more than a political ploy. It doesn't simplify any accounting anywhere. It doesn't simplify anything the school district is going to do. We still have to expend money for Social Security, and that's simply dependent on the amount of wages we have, which go up every year. We still have the same, we have to go for transportation, which goes up every year. And we have to expend for charter and non-public school transportation every year, and that goes up. So all of those numbers are going up in there as a cost that we cannot avoid. We're mandated to do that. We have to pay Social Security taxes. We have to pay transportation, unless we cancel transportation entirely in the district. And those numbers go up independent of anything that talks about the budget in terms of increases. They go up whatever they're going to go up. So if the total number in the quote block grant doesn't go up enough to cover the increases in expenditures in those other categories that are put in there, it gets taken away from what you would have considered before the basic education subsidy, which is a direct impact on all of the students in school. So this, again, is a political ploy. We'll see what happens. The bills haven't been introduced. We're still talking about it. It's the silly season, but again, when we're having to go into our budget early because of the primary, which we're now not sure about when it's going to be held, again, and we get into that in a second, is having an impact on our budget process that's going to be quite difficult for our business office and all the people who have to deal with this to figure out what we're really going to get, and then try to explain it to us, and try to explain to us why we're cutting in certain areas and so forth, because the money isn't there coming from the state. In regard to the primary election, we're still up in the air in Pennsylvania because the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ruled that the redistricting plan that was done earlier this year was unconstitutional, and it has to be redone. There are some in the legislature who are attempting to redo it in time, quote unquote, to run the special election, which has been moved up, remember, to an earlier date in April. And there are people who were running for office who quit running for office because the old district does not include their house, where the new district is. So they were planning on running in one district, and now they're not in that district temporarily because the court said use the old districts. And so some people are trying to ram through a bill to try to redo this, but it requires some public meetings and stuff like that. And you can imagine if you try to tell the people in the middle of April, on April 29th, they're going to run for a new position from a new district, how that's going to screw up the entire election campaign. So other people are saying, nope, you're going to have to run in the old districts, we'll figure it out, and it'll be for next year. Nobody knows what's happening yet. So we have a lot of confusion about, some people have talked about, well, we moved it up, we can move it back. So we'll move it back to May. But the people who moved it to April in order to try to influence the elections don't want that to happen. And again, it just throws the whole thing into confusion. So right now, Pennsylvania is a very confused state. And we don't know where it's going to happen, where it's going to go. It's in the laps of the legislature, which is sort of like saying that you might as well just take a guess, throw 100 papers up in the air and see which one lands face up, and you might have something to understand what's going on. But it's a very confusing thing, and so you're going to hear a lot of stuff over the next few weeks as somebody tries to figure this out, and we'll hear more from our budgeting staff as they try to figure it out too. But again, remember, the governor's budget is not the state budget. The governor's budget is his budget proposal. So we don't know yet what the final state budget is going to be. We only know what the governor has proposed. We don't know what the counter proposals are. So, hold on for news at 11, and maybe we'll be able to figure this out. Are there any questions I can answer, Mr. Stoltz?
I just think that it's worth pointing out that until they decide this nonsense with redistricting, every precinct but one in the East Penn School District is without representation in the State House at this moment. And we will be until they can, Sam Smith brought this point up, although I can't exactly say he didn't have this coming. He can't issue a writ for a special election until they decide what they're doing as far as this. What I'm hearing, I don't know if this is concurrent with you, is that slowly but surely the Republicans are beginning to cave to the realization that they're going to have to deal with the president districts, at least for this election cycle. They don't like it, but they're starting to cave to that idea.
Well, like I said, the timing is so bad that they may be forced to, but anyway, that's the kind of thing we're dealing with. They can't put out a special election without knowing what the district is they're going to have a special election in. And right now, we don't have a representative because ours is in the courtroom. Former one is in the courtroom, so.
As a judge, not as a...
Worth pointing out.
Yeah, as a judge. Although there are some of the Pennsylvania legislators that are in court for another reason.
Exactly.
Mr. Bacher.
You mentioned that some states were filing for waivers for No Child Left Behind. I heard recently that New Jersey's was accepted. Is there any idea whether Pennsylvania, it's a state, the whole state has to apply, it's not something that, am I right? That
Well, Pennsylvania has applied for something, and they didn't call it a waiver. Maybe Dr. Seidenberg can mention it.
Our understanding is that Secretary Tamales has applied for a freeze on current AYP levels. And I don't know exactly what that is going to look like. I do know that the states are in alignment with the President's call for teacher evaluations. Pennsylvania, as Mrs. Fuller reported, is deeply engaged in looking at altering the way teachers are evaluated and also principals. And that sort of dovetails with the President's. Remember, what Mr. Ballard said is so true. The Congress has not approved an extension of ESEA, and that's a mess. The Senate, and remember I reported back, maybe you weren't on the board, we visited Washington last September. We do know that Senator Harkin, he's a Democrat, they have an idea about what the Senate wants to put in ESEA, and Congressman Smith from Minnesota, who heads up the Republicans are in the majority of the House, that those bills, although there's some common ground, they're pretty much far apart, so who knows. And so we're just going to have to wait and see. I'm happy at an outset that I think most people understand that special education students shouldn't be thrown into that standardized mess. That was always a bad flaw, but No Child Left Behind. But going forward, there's some components that, again, we liked when the superintendents in Lehigh County, when we heard from people in the State Department, the National Department of Education. We're waiting to hear what's going to happen with STEM. We've been gearing up for the last 3 years. We're ready to go. We hear there's going to be money in it. Well, where is it and how do we get some of it? I think that's already too, but we're just going to have to hold tight and, like everyone else, find out what it all means. And someone will tell us someday. It is what it is. It's confusion.
Any other questions? None appearing, we'll move on to business operations. Is there any objection to combining items 1, 2, 3, and 4? None appearing, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Any discussion on these items? None appearing, Ms. Birchall, will you call the roll?
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Mrs. Donchez.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller. Aye. Mr. Bacher.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde. Aye. Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
3 ayes.
Is there any new business to come before the board this evening? Ms. Fuller?
Not really new business, but a comment. 3 times within the last several weeks, I had the opportunity to see the value of an East Penn education in action. As Dr. Seidenberger mentioned, Dane DeHaan, who was a student here for 12 years, I guess, if you count kindergarten. I remember seeing him as in a lead role in The Wiz on the Emmaus High School stage. And I remember seeing him in a lead role in Footloose on the Emmaus High School stage. And it was quite remarkable to see that young man on the big screen at the Rave Theater and to see how far he's come. In January, I had the opportunity to see an Emmaus High School graduate play a solo performance at Carnegie Hall. He had 4 encores and 5 standing ovations. And it was Keith Jarrett, a member of the Emmaus High School class of 1962. Now, I don't personally know Pop Peters, affectionately was the affectionate name of the music director then. And I'm sure that Mr. Earl Peters was not by any means solely responsible for that Emmaus High School graduate success. But he helped lay the foundation, I'm sure, that helped Keith Jarrett attain the success that he's received. And I wish that my schedule permitted me to attend many more student assemblies, but I had the pleasure of going to the West Coastville STEM Assembly last week. And it was wonderful to see the enthusiasm of the students, the second graders, as they discussed all that they had learned and how they had learned it. And to see the enthusiasm of the parents there. And beyond the achievements of the second grade class, it was wonderful to see all of the other young children, other people being saluted and praised and helped and congratulated. And to see a real sense of family and community in action. And I went away just feeling uplifted and wishing that I could go to every single assembly in my district, because I know that what happened at West Coastville is not unique to West Coastville, but it happens throughout the district all the time. So I just had to share all of that. I know that it's getting late, but it was really a wonderful, eye-opening couple of weeks for me, and I needed to share that with you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Ms. Sanchez.
Yes, I would like to add on to Ms. Bowler's commendations, if you would. I did get to go to West Coastville as well, and it was really exciting. And at the LCTI hands-on competition, I was able to spend a couple hours there in the afternoon, and I found it was really great, that hands-on education, as well as getting up to LCTI during the board meeting that I sat in on. But I also wanted to give a little report on the board class that I took. Well, that Mr. Walker and Ms. Moore and I took, but I'll speak just personally. It was a 2-day course for new board members and returning board members, and they highlighted the roles of the board, and I just wanted to say that it said that the board sets the goal, it states the expectation and clarifies the responsibility, or sets the what, and the admin acts to accomplish the goal and carry out the activities, so that would be the how. And a lot of time was spent on meetings and sunshine law and executive sessions and parliamentary procedures and agendas. That was helpful. The budget, the Act 1, the budget timeline, sources of revenues, ideas for reducing and spending. There was little time spent on school accounting with the functions and the objects, which was the part I was really interested in. Probably that was okay, but I noticed that several school directors do have a detailed budget in hand, so it was encouraging, and thank you for your work on it so far. I look forward to getting it. And I had an email from someone who had read in the paper that I had requested that detail, and they're looking forward to it as well. So thank you for working on it. There was an overview on legal aspects with employees and students given by one of the attorneys. And lastly, the session on the No Child Left Behind, the PSA testing, and the AYP. So that during the Q&A at the end of the sessions, the lecturer was asked whether the employees of PSBA pay into PESERS, the Public School Employees Retirement System. And upon confirmation that this is true, I became a little disillusioned with the stance of the PSBA, some of the policies, because in essence, our taxpayers pay their taxes to the school district. The school district uses the money to belong to PSBA, and then if PSBA pays into PESERS, I just question what the incentive is to reform the pension problem, which is at the moment really the biggest elephant in the room. But all in all, I'm glad I went. I really took a lot away from the opportunity. I enjoyed meeting the school directors from other districts and comparing notes. And I would like to continue to attend some sessions by PSBA as another option and another point of view to listen to. However, I will personally pay for any sessions that I attend, and I do want to, I'm going to refund the tax money that was used for me to go to the session. I appreciate the opportunity. It's something I feel I need to do, and I appreciate your understanding. Thank you.
Just two items I'd like to note. One is that with the PSBA Value Pass, a lot of those things are already paid for all of us, so you don't have to pay for them. And the second thing is, I think you can go on the PSBA website and download their pension reform paper about 3 years ago.
I did that thing.
And you'll find out that they proposed a widespread, as part of their advocacy for the membership, a widespread revamping of the entire state system. The PSBA employees were put on that pension plan because otherwise the PSBA would have had to come up with its own pension plan and be funding it that way. So the legislature allowed them to enroll their employees in the state program, and it's simply a pass-through of the money that they would normally have to put to in any pension plan for any of their employees to be there. But the committee that they had was formed by school board members that rewrote the pension, and the staff of PSBA simply carries out those directives. So read that plan and see what you think. It was quite a widespread revamping issue for the state pension plan.
I did read it, and I know it's late, so I don't want to get into it. I think it could be stronger.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Yeah, two items. First of all, the question of cyber charter schools came up earlier. I know a family who lives in a district to the north of us. They wear red and white, but we won't name them. This family had one daughter who was struggling in school because of some health challenges. She withdrew from the regular school and enrolled in a cyber charter school. I told them about the cyber learning program, the VLN, that was offered through Parkland, and they said, well, those courses are just too difficult. So there's a data point, anecdotal. The plural of anecdote is not data, I realize, but one anecdote that here's a family that has opted for a cyber charter school because it's easier, less difficult, less work than an education offered by one of the fine districts in this county. The other thing that came up earlier, one of the families talked about children who struggle with special needs. I believe the state still has the Project Connect program. I don't think it's yet fallen completely by the Budget Act, has it? No? No, we don't have it, or no, it's still available. Okay, great. So that's something I would recommend to anyone. If they have a child who is preschool age, that's a wonderful program that can provide a real leg up for students who might have special needs, that can help prepare them better for school and help ease the transition to it. Our youngest daughter certainly benefited tremendously from it. Thank you.
Any other new business? We had a clear session, or executive session before this meeting to discuss legal matters, legal personnel, and real estate. Do I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.